Hey y'all, Biohack here. In the last update on Wednesday, we got the addition of the Ulukita region to the game, and in particular, we can now get this item called the Origin of Dark Hunger as a drop from that new region. This item is something that was announced quite a while ago. In fact, in the past, it's been an event-based item, and with this recent update, they've now tweaked it a little bit and added it as a drop into the game. So a lot of people have had a ton of questions about this, like what is it worth? How much should you pay for it? Da 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 da. And because I'm kind of known as the guy who does a lot of enhancing, I've been getting tons and tons of questions about this thing. So in this video, I want to talk about this item, what it does, how it works, and try and give you some ways to figure out what this thing is actually worth in terms of how much silver someone might be willing to pay for it. So if that sounds interesting, please stick around and we'll go ahead and jump into it. Okay, so what is this thing and how does it actually work? Essentially what happens is you get this Origin of Dark Hunger, and I'm going to do something I am not going to recommend after watching this video. I'm going to buy one of these just so I can show you how it works. So, oh no, it's gone. Rip my money. Please like and subscribe to the channel if you think that's worth it. Because, yeah, as we're going to go through, these things are not worth 2 billion silver, but we'll talk about that later. Okay, how's this thing work? Basically, you have this Origin of Dark Hunger here in the inventory. You take your fail stack here, you go into Extract, you go into Devour, and you put it here, and it will increase your stack just like that. Like I said, there is a whole chart that basically tells you how many additional stacks you will get out of the Origin, depending on what your fail stack level is. So I'm going to go ahead and throw that up on the screen so we can look at it. Essentially what you have here, let me look at it at the same time. If you start at basically no stacks, at 100 stacks, that's the minimum you can use on it, you'll get a bonus 15, and then it decreases as you go up. So 106 to 109 is 14, 110 to 116 is 13, so on and so forth. Once you hit 280, you're only getting 2 stacks per Origin of Dark Hunger, and then for the very last stack, 299, you get 1 additional stack. Now, one thing I want to point out, if we jump back into the game here, when it's talking about those stacks in the numbers, it's looking at this additional enhancement chance right here, not this current enhancement chance. This current enhancement chance is including things like your Rulipy Adventure Log bonus and whatever Valk's Cry you have put onto the initial base stack. So for me, someone who's completed the Ruben Herald's Journal and can get 13 additional Valk's Cry, and someone who has 30,000 quests completed for the plus 5 Rulipy base fail stack bonus, I can get an additional 18 stacks off everything in that chart. And so when it says 100 stack, that would be like a 118 stack for me if I'd already applied my Advice of Valks, for example, or my Valk's Cry, just to give you an idea. So if you're wondering like why the numbers don't match up, check that. Okay, so that's how the item works, and how essentially what it can do is let you turn a 100 stack into a 300 stack. But the real question everyone has is it worth it? And should I actually use this method? And the thing is like, is it worth it is a question that is always going to depend on how much silver these things actually cost. So if we look at the market for these again, as soon as they came out, they basically shot all the way up to max price very quickly, and now they are currently in free fall and they are crashing back down. No thanks to the one that I just bought. And to be honest, I think these things are massively overpriced, but let's jump in and look at some of the ways that you can value how much an Origin of Dark Hunger was worth. Now, one of the things I want to say is because you can get so many different number of stacks at so many different places in the whole enhancement strategy, it's impossible to kind of go over all of them. But I think we'll go over, I'm going to start basically by going over the ones where I think give it the best light and say like, at the most, how much could this thing possibly be worth? And then we'll go and we'll look at some of the other ways you could make fail stacks instead and what those actually cost, and try and get a sense for what this thing is actually worth paying. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into that now. And I think we're going to start with looking at Debo accessories. All right. So the way I see it, there are basically two different ways to calculate how much these origins are worth. We can either look at what the stacks are worth and then how much it would cost to increase that stack to the value the origin would give using some other method, which I think is honestly the more correct way to do it, but we'll talk about that later. The other way to do it is to look at a situation where you have a stack, you're about to click an item, and you're like, is it worth it to use the origin of Dark Hunger or not to boost the success rate before I click that item? And so I think if we look at sort of the most generous possible scenario for how we might want to use the origin of Dark Hunger, I think it would probably be if you were going to go for a Debo accessory. So if we look at the Debo Earring, for example, we can see that it's 99 billion silver and completely sold out on the NA market at the time of this video. We're also going to need the value of the Tri Debo. The simulation we're going to be looking at here, or the math behind what we're going to be looking at here, is assuming you buy a Tet Debo off the market. You probably have to grind the base. So how much is the base worth? And then if it downgrades to Tri, you're going to sell it back to the market. And we're looking at essentially like the most expensive way to enhance the Debo. But if you just completely hate grinding crypt or Olins or whatever you need to do for this, that's what you're going to do. And so what is like the most primo like optimal way, like what's the most expensive thing we could reasonably think about doing with these Dark Hungers to see if they're going to save us any money? So that's the idea here. That's what we're having in this spreadsheet. If I jump back to it, we've got our origin of Dark Hunger here. And that's what we put in the spreadsheet. So we put our value for our Tet Debo at 99 billion silver. We put our Tri value at 17.4, which is what we would get after we sold it if it downgraded. The base value is assuming that we are grinding crypt or whatever, Olin's whatever, and we're going to take it to Tet, and then we're going to sell it at Tet at 99 billion, right? That's kind of, if you're curious about all the math behind this, I suggest you watch the video I did a couple weeks ago about Debo enhancing, but that's what we're going to use. We're going to use 5.33 billion silver for the value of the base accessory. Then we have the number of crons that you need to click it for Tet to Pen. We're going to say we're using vendor crons, which are 2 million silver. And then from here, we have all the different components we need to figure out how much would it cost to make the item with a certain stack. In this case, we're going to look at a 279 base stack. We're going to assume no Rulipy and no Ruben Herald's journal. So if you Valk it 10 more, it would be a 289 stack. We're not going to, like I said, we're not going to include the maximum, which would be an additional 18. So again, more ways to basically try and make the origin look better. And then if you use an origin in this scenario, you'll get an extra 3 stacks. You'll take your 279 to 282. Again, that's 292. We can then figure out like what the success rate is, how many clicks you're going to need to do, how many clicks are going to downgrade, how many clicks are going to fail but not downgrade, all that. And we can basically break it up into all the different components and calculate what would it cost to make the Pen Debo Earring with these parameters, and what would it cost if we increase the stack after using the Dark Origin of Hunger. So I'm not going to go through all this math. I'll throw this spreadsheet down in the description for anyone who wants to look at it. Every time I make one of these, I always end up with a bunch of people like finding little minor bugs. Usually it's nothing important, but these numbers sometimes change by, like a few million silver. That'll probably happen here. So check that for the most recent. But I don't think the major conclusions are going to change. So what we have here is we have a cost to make a Pen Debo on a 289 stack. Now, personally, I think this is too high of a stack for Debo. I did my last one on a 277 after Valks and Rulipy. So that's an extra plus 18. That means my base stack was 249. Is that right? I think that's right. And then we added an additional 18 on top of that. Oh wait, no, maybe it was 259. Okay, anyway, you get the idea. So I think this is a higher stack than you'd actually want to use, but I think this is the one that paints the Origin of Dark Hunger in the best light. So how much saving would we actually get? Well, we can calculate what the total cost to make it is in this red column right here, and we see that it's 474.8 billion silver under these conditions to make the Debo Earring at our 279 base stack. If we add the Origin of Dark Hunger, increase it to 282, 292. it becomes 470, 784. So the difference between that is right here, and that is 4,058,000,000 silver. So under these conditions, what this says is that the Origin of Dark Hunger is actually a pretty good deal. It's actually worth using the Origins to boost this stack up, to save money on the Deboreka. So if you're in a world where you're buying Tet Debos for 99 billion silver off the market, and you have a 279 stack, and you want to boost it 3 more, pay the 4 billion. I think they cap at 3, so pay the 3 billion. So yeah, okay, that gives us our top end, right? Like in that scenario, this thing is actually worth this price. But it gets a little more complicated. First off, let's go ahead and jump over, and I'm going to put in the numbers for what it would cost if we did an accessory other than the earring, maybe one of the ones that's at a lower price, and we'll see how that changes the number. Okay, so let's imagine a different scenario. Let's say we're looking at one of the other Deberekas, one that's not as difficult to get as the earring. As I talked about in my video a couple weeks ago about Deboreka enhancing, no surprise here that the Tet Debo belts have fallen quite a bit. They're now sitting at 84 billion on North America, and from what I'm told, I believe this is towards the higher end relative to other servers. I think EU has them all the way down at about 60. So if we go ahead and we use a lower value for that Tet Debo, it is going to affect the math on how viable these Origin of Dark Hungers are. So what we've done here is we've used this value of the Tet. I also went and put this in to the other spreadsheet to determine how much the base is worth. So we put 84 billion in for the Tet. We put 4.3 billion in for the base, which is what it comes to if you're going to grind for the bases, make them to Tet, and sell them. And then the try is basically the same value if we're assuming a world where you're going to sell the try. Again, not recommended to sell the try, but that's what we're going to kind of pretend here. So if we jump back into the spreadsheet and I pull it back up, we can now see that the numbers look a little different. It actually hasn't fallen kind of as much as I was expecting it to. In this scenario, we still have a 3.5 billion silver in savings for using an Origin. So as long as the Origins are priced less than 3.5 billion, it would still be worth it to use it in this scenario where we're using a 279 stack and getting three extra stacks out of it. Now, one of the things in here is I did use the cron value of the vendor crons, 1.35 or 2 million. If we change that to 1.3526, which is the value for the costume crons, so if you're getting your crons from costumes, we do see this drops about 500 million silver off the value of the Origin, and our total cost to make the Deboreka falls from 368.9 billion to about 366 billion. So it's still, pretty worthwhile to use it in this particular scenario versus using, versus not doing it. But as we're going to see, when we start to look at, how other options to generate that stacks, it's going to start looking a lot less enticing. So there's one more thing I want to show you real quick. So I'm going to go enter those numbers real quick, which is what happens if we're not getting 3 fail stacks out of using the Origin. What if we take this up and we're saying we're starting at 282 and we're looking at only getting 1? Well, it's essentially the same math here, except for instead of dividing this by instead of getting 3 stacks, we'd only get 2. So let me go plug those numbers in real quick, and I'll tell you what we find out. All right, so I went and put all the numbers in. Pretty easy fix. We just basically changed this to 282, 292 for our starting, and then we've added 2 more fail stacks to go to 284, aka 294, and we've looked at how that changed. One of the things you'll notice is that the value fell a lot. It fell by what we would expect, about a third. So now we're looking at only about 2 billion silver in savings for using a Dark Hunger if we're only getting 2 stacks per Origin. So I just thought I'd throw that in there too, because we're seeing this creep down more and more and more. But now let's jump into the real reason why these things are bad, which is, okay, we know that boosting these stacks is worth it in terms of saving the money, but are there better ways that we could boost that stack instead? Okay, so now we're going to simulate a different scenario. We're going to math that out. This is probably one of the worst ways I think you can possibly push big stacks, but I think it's really telling when we start comparing this to the Origin of Dark Hunger. So imagine a scenario where you have a 279 unvalk, so 289 stack. You're going to go out and you're going to buy a Tet Blackstar off the market. You are going to click that thing raw and attempt to get a pen. And if it goes back to try, you're going to sell it off the market. And then we're going to calculate in that scenario, which I do not recommend, how much does it cost to generate every single stack using that strategy. So if we take our same world where we're at before, we're at our 279 stack where we normally get 3 Origin of Dark Hungers, which I think is sort of like one of the best breakpoints for this if we're thinking about ultimately making a stack for Debo Earring. If we follow all this logic, what we have here is we have a few different values we have to determine. The first thing is that we need to know what the value of the stack is, because there is a probability of losing the stack. And so this is why it's a little more complicated than just looking at the other scenario where we say, what's all the math, and we just completely ignore the stack entirely because it doesn't matter, because it's fixed in both scenarios. Here, we actually have, like I said, that probability of losing that stack. So we need to have a value in here. I went ahead and put in 20 billion for a 279 stack. I feel like that's a fairly reasonable value, but it's not going to be fixed. It's going to be changing all the time based on the market, based on how profitable pen accessories are to make, based on the price of blackstones and hards and sharps and all the rest of it. We can put in other values for this and it will change it by a bit. It doesn't change it by an insane amount. I mean, even if we put in like crazy numbers like 75 billion for this stack, it'll have an impact. It went from like about $1 billion to like 1.7. But anyway, so we have that as our value. I'm going to put this in as what I think is a fairly reasonable value for a 279 stack. We have our Tet Blackstar value, which we bought off the market. We have our Blackstar value. Actually, here in this scenario, I'm valuing it. That's the current market price. So let's make sure we adjust for the taxes. 2712. So again, this is assuming you're going to sell it once you hit it. Pen Blackstars currently aren't worth a lot on the NA market. So if you sell this thing for, I think I put this in at like 125 billion, you'll get 111 after taxes. And then you have our Memfrags at 3 and our Flawless Magical Blackstones for about 10. Okay, so then what we can do is that same sort of logic. Essentially, it all gets calculated into this click cost here, which is how much is every click going to cost you in total once we consider everything, including the value of the pen if it happens to go up, including the loss in value if the Tet downgrades back to, or if we fail and the Tet downgrades back to try. If it, what is the value of the stack that's lost if it goes up, the repair cost of the memory fragments, the stones, all that kind of stuff. So all that goes in here to calculate how much a single click will cost us. And the answer is, it is 7,075,000,000. We will get 6 stacks. And so what that works out is to about 1.18 billion per stack. That's how much we're paying if we buy a Tet off the market and raw click it to pen on this 279 stack that we're starting with, given all these parameters here. And so what you'll notice is that is way, way less than what we just calculated for the Debo Earring accessory a minute ago. If I jump back to that, we left off at about 2 billion as the lowest value we could maybe argue the Origin is worth if we're comparing it to how much it saves us on making a Debo. But if we look at other ways to build the stack, even this one, which is generally considered pretty horrible, is significantly better than using the Origin. So even buying Tet Blackstar and raw clicking it to pen, significantly cheaper. So right off the bat, this means that I would never pay more than like 1.2 billion for these Origin of Dark Hungers, because even in a terrible stack strategy, this is still going to be more efficient. But like I said, I'm saying this is a terrible stack strategy. So let's look at some even better ways to make fail stacks that are going to be even less expensive and get an even more clear example of what an Origin might be worth. All right, so let's look at another option. We talked about raw clicking Pen Blackstar being pretty bad, but I was kind of looking at some different options that we could use to make the stack, and I noticed that actually one of the Pen Boss gears is actually pretty decent right now. So what if we assume something a little different? What if we assume you're going to buy a Tet Begs Gloves off the market? You're going to, again, raw click it to pen and sell the try if it fails. Well, we can go ahead and we can put all of that math in the spreadsheet and check out how those numbers look. look. So real quick, let me show you in the market what these prices are. We're selling pen bags for about 13.6 billion, which is actually surprisingly high. Usually these things sell for less than that, so definitely this might not always be applicable, but it's worth running. I mean, these are current numbers on NA, so take that for what it's worth and adjust it to your market. But that's the value of pens right now. Tets are 1.88 billion, and tries are, you could probably sell it for, well, there's a buy order for 12.3, or maybe even sell it for 1.37. And then we'll use the same, like 3 million for Memfrags and roughly 2 million for the stone. So let me throw those numbers in, and we'll see how that works out. Okay, so if we jump back into our spreadsheet, we can put in our new numbers. We still have our same stack value, about 20 billion. Honestly, I've been thinking about this. This is probably a little low. I probably should have gone a little bit higher than 20 billion, but we're going to leave it there for consistency, although I can show you what it's like as we increase it. We had to adjust our, this says Blackstar success rate, but this should just say success rate, because now we're looking at boss gear, which is 0.89 or 8.97% on our 289 stack. We have our TET value, which we got from the market at 1.88. Our try value, this is after we sell it to that pre-order, I think is what we're using. We have our pen value, which was 13.6. Again, we have to take off our taxes. I'm assuming no merchant ring, anything like that. Oh, I forgot to update our Memfrags, our 3 mil, and this should be 10. Okay, there we go. And then we have our stone. All right. So all this goes in and we get our new click cost. And if we work all this out, we get about 287.8 million silver to increase every single stack level, using buying this TET boss gear off the market, raw clicking it to pen, selling the pen if it goes up, or selling the try if it downgrades. So even this, I don't think is a particularly good strategy. This is not the strategy I would use to make these stacks. I might do boss gear, especially if it stays at the current value of 13.6. That's pretty good. I might do reblath instead. But even in a scenario where it's not even that optimal, we're still getting only about 288 million silver per stack, even up to 279. So obviously this is way, way better than the Origin of Dark Hunger. One thing I do want to mention is this does have a higher success rate than the Blackstar, and that matters because it means as the value of the stack goes up, this portion, like the value or the cost when we lose the stack, starts to have a bigger impact due to that higher success rate. So if we raise it to 30 billion, which is probably a more fair value, it's about 437 million per stack. So the Origins do have the advantage in that you click and you're guaranteed to get what you expect, right? You're never going to lose your stack to something else. But you're paying a massive premium, especially if you buy them for the like 2.1 billion silver like I did at the beginning of this video. Even in what I would consider not to be the most optimal fail stacking systems, it's still just far more efficient to push your stacks using other methods than these Origin of Dark Hungers. I think they really need to get down to around the 400 to 500 million silver mark until they're actually worth using. This is kind of what they've been priced at when we were able to get them with events through, like, they'd have like stuff you needed to buy from the NPC to fuse them and stuff like that. That's a pretty reasonable value. But to be honest, even though, as we saw with the Debo calculations, you're saving a lot of money by pushing up the stacks using the Origin, if you're going to use it on a Debo, there's just much better ways to get those stacks. So that's kind of the moral of the story of this video. I hope you found this helpful. I hope it wasn't too long and that we kind of went through all these different scenarios, but that's the reality of these Origins, as this is just scratching the surface of all the possible different scenarios you could use. I tried to basically create scenarios that put them in their best light and then compare them to the alternatives in their best light. I mean, I haven't literally mathed out every single possible scenario for these Origins, but at least thinking about it and using my best judgment with a lot of enhancing experience, this is probably what I would expect to be about the best place to use them. And so when they're just so out-competed by the other alternative methods, I just can't recommend paying anything close to their current market value. So anyway, that's the moral of this story, I guess, the end of the video in terms of all this math. If you found it helpful, please subscribe to the channel, give this video a thumbs up, and don't buy 2 billion silver Origin of Dark Hungers. I will see you in the next one. Cheers.